start this edition in Iran, where there have been reports of overnight clashes between security forces and protesters. This is a video of the country's flag being burned in the western Kurdistan province. Human rights groups say security forces have used live ammunition against civilians there. There are also reports of protests in cities and towns in several other locations. The recent unrest was sparked by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who had been in the custody of Iran's morality police. I'm joined now by academic Sadegh Ziba Kalam. He was a professor at Tehran University and claims he was dismissed from his job for speaking out against the Iranian government. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to begin by asking about your expulsion. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Yalda, I have been teaching at Tehran University Faculty of Law and Political Science for more than 30 years since I got my PhD from Bradford University and returned to Iran. And all of a sudden, they told me that a few days ago that I'm not allowed to teach anymore. And they told me that the intelligence institution which operates at Tehran University, they have demanded that I mustn't teach any longer. And the point is that 40 students had taken the subject with me, and I was supposed to teach them at the beginning of this academic year. And they told me that another lecturer has been appointed in your place. That simple as that. I mean, after 30 years, they simply behaved like that. But of course,
why do you think, Professor, that this has happened? I mean, as you say, that you've been teaching for decades. Why do you think this is happening?
The only explanation is that they are very annoyed and angry about not what I teach, but rather about the political position that I have taken. About a couple of months ago, I was called by the Ministry of Intelligence, and they told me that we are watching you, and you are preaching and you are writing, and in Clubhouse and in social media, you are preaching basically a secular establishment, and you're trying to replace the Islamic regime. I said, well, I have no organization. I am just a university professor. And they said that even so, we realize that there are not accomplices with you, and you have no party, you have no organization. But nevertheless, what you teach, what you say, tantamount to the fact that you basically say that the Islamic regime has been a failure, and you preach a secular regime for Iran.
But what about the protests now? Are you standing in support of the protesters? Have you encouraged them? I mean, why do you think this expulsion has happened at this point in time?
Well, Yalda, let me begin by saying that the magnitude, the extent of these protests, simply, it has astonished everyone. Not only the government and the establishment, but also the opposition. I mean, to be honest with you, if you would have told me 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when all these started, that Professor Ziba Kalam, there would be a widespread unrest throughout Iran, I would have told you that no, Yallah, you are mistaken. It won't happen in Iran. The government would put it down, and it won't go on for 1 month. And if you had asked me that, are you sure? I would have told you, yes, I'm sure, because the Islamic regime is so powerful that would put it down immediately. And I never thought, I could never imagine that it would go on for 1 month, and it's still going on. I mean, today is It's Thursday. Yesterday, the demonstration started, the gathering started from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And what is amazing is that they had said it, that we would gather throughout Iran at 2 o'clock. I mean, you could ask yourself that who made this announcement? Who are these people? And obviously, it is not one person. It is not a group of people. It is not a single organ. It's just the youth that are deciding the whole thing.
Are you saying, though, that this time, I mean, we have seen demonstrations in Iran before, in 2009 during the Green movement. We saw in 2019 protests. Do you think it's different this time?
It is very different. It is very different. It has two distinct characteristics, which again has baffled everyone. The first characteristic is that they are teenagers. They are what we call them. They were born in the 80s. I mean, they are around 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 16-year-old. Even high school students have poured out. This is the first characteristic of this mass movement, and the second characteristic of it is the woman, Iranian woman, and they are so courageous. And they go in front of the security guard and the Basijis. This is the volunteer the government force and the Revolutionary Guard without actually fearing, and they simply take up their scarf, they burn it, they wave it in the sky, just in front of the security people. And again, everyone is so surprised as the degree of boldness that Iranian women are showing.
You're in Tehran at the moment. Are you seeing these things unfold there in the city right now?
At the moment, no. At the moment, it's very quiet because it's nearly it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they usually start at night when it gets dark, because it would be more difficult for the police, for the security people to chase them and to shoot at them, and etc. etc. So it's more. It's usually they happen at night, but yesterday I think it was just a breaking point for this demonstration, because they had announced 3 days ago, the beginning of the week, that on Wednesday we all would come out, and they did. They did throughout Iran, in dozens of small and large towns and cities. The youth came out.
But Professor, I've got a couple of questions. I mean, you participated in the 1979 revolution. There are many people across the world from the Iranian diaspora, also in Iran, who are calling this a revolution. Given you took part in that revolution, do you see similarities here?
There are similarities and there are differences. The most important similarity is the widespread dissension, the widespread hatred of the regime. I mean, in 1979, you barely could find an Iranian educated, poor, rich, workers, the government employees, etc., who would not hate Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi and that regime. A similar phenomena is happening after nearly 44 years, which is which is maybe not to that extent, because the regime has still some supporter, and that's the difference between what is happening today and what happened 43 years ago, 44 years ago. There are still some supporters of the Islamic regime, maybe 10%, maybe 15%. They can't be more than 20%. So that's the similarity. The difference is that during the Islamic Revolution in 1979, everything was very much organized. There was a leadership, namely Ayatollah Khomeini, and
now there doesn't seem to be a very strong opposition. And just very briefly, Professor, if you can tell me, you're speaking to us from Tehran at the moment. Are you safe? Do you feel safe?
It is possible that they would call me and they would tell me that to come to the Evin prison or to come in another detention. And I've told my family that this might happen, and I hope, I pray to God that this doesn't happen, that they do not detain me. But it is possible. I never thought that they would simply tell me after 30 years that you are not allowed to teach anymore. And by the same token, it might happen tonight or some another day that please, come and we want to talk to you and detain me.
Professor, we hope you stay safe. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Sadegh Ziba Kalam talking to us there live from Tehran.